Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
A person's recent Google search history, it turns out, is a better predictor of suicide than their clinician's most recent notes. Yes, you heard that right. A person's Google search history is a better predictor of suicide than a medical professional's notes. What are we talking about? Well, the rise of big data psychiatry. And who's making sure that AI machines aren't going to be biased and racist? You're going to say, what? How can AI machines be racist or biased? Well, you may have heard of the now infamous example of an individual who took a bunch of photos of a black friend of theirs, and Google the Google algorithm decided to classify those into a folder and called it gorillas. So obviously there can be issues with AI. We've got a lot to talk about today, but any conversation on the latest and greatest technology, psychiatry, and artificial intelligence would simply not be complete without
TrueChat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
All right, folks. So my mind is all over the place today, so I will try to stay on topic, but I've been having these conversations with myself. Maybe I need some psychiatric help. It's been a big mowing day, and I've had a lot of time to think. And so we're going to get started, but it's kind of interesting. Both these topics today, to me, they're logical and make sense, but I guess we're going to talk about why to some people they're not logical. But to me, well, yeah, we use all kinds of data to take care of my physical health. Why can't we use data to take care of my mental health? And I just, for full disclosure, did not bring my glasses today, so I can't read the Webster's dictionary. So Justin has put up not really a word of the day because it's two words: artificial intelligence. The theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, and translation between languages. So it is used as a noun. So artificial intelligence, it's two words here for word of the day.
And it's from the Oxford Languages Dictionary.
There you go. All right. But, and of course, if you're a longtime listener, you've heard me say this before. If humans create AI, there are going to be problems with it because it's only as good as the humans who put it together. But we're going to talk about why these problems are occurring. And hopefully, what's the fix?
So the first one here is an article from the Wall Street Journal, which of course is linked at thestateofus.org, and it's entitled "The Rise of Big Data Psychiatry. The information captured by our smartphones, as well as new speech and facial recognition technologies, can yield invaluable insights for mental health professionals." Lance, before we dive in, though, to the artificial intelligence and big data psychiatry stuff, why should anybody care about this? I mean, I don't have any psychiatric issues, and I'm not going to use AI, so who cares?
The friendly redneck liberal has psychiatric problems just because
he doesn't get active
whether it's
care
self-diagnosed or active care doesn't mean that he doesn't have problems. And AI is going to be involved in my life whether I want it to be or not, because decisions are going to be made. Cameras are going to see me and the different activities that I participate in. And it's there, because it's like, they can't do any psychiatric care on me because I don't have a smartphone. Yeah, well, I've got to get one next month because otherwise my flip phone, which is 3G, is being outdated by my carrier. So I'm either going to have to find a carrier who will do 3G, or yours truly will have a smartphone, which means people will get data on me. But I think the more of the psychiatry piece, though, why you care is because people will be allowed to, or will be able to take better care of you. And everybody should care about being taken care of. And we should be concerned about AI because, the computers don't make a mistake. Well, the problems that it caused could reverberate and cause even more problems down the road.
The article opens with this, and I think it's a good introduction to why would we want to involve computers in psychiatry. Well, here's how it opens. As a physician, I need to figure out 3 things when a new patient walks into my office: what their life is typically like, what has changed that made them seek treatment, and what I can do to help. It's a complex problem, and most fields of medicine approach it by taking measurements. If I were a cardiologist evaluating a patient's chest pain, for instance, I would speak with the patient, but then I would listen to their heart and measure their pulse and blood pressure. I might order an electrocardiogram or a cardiac stress test, tools that weren't available a century ago. Because I'm a psychiatrist, however, I evaluate patients in precisely the same way that my predecessors did in 1920. I ask them to tell me what's wrong, and while they're talking, I carefully observe their speech and behavior. But psychiatry has remained largely immune to measurement. At no point in the examination do I gather numerical data about the patient's life or behavior, even though tools for taking such measurements already exist. In fact, you're likely carrying one around in your pocket right now. And what do we mean by that? Well, that's part of what I opened the show with. Smartphones measure our movements with accelerometers, our location with GPS, and our social engagement with the numbers of calls and texts we send. These data have extraordinary potential for psychiatric diagnosis and treatment. Studies have shown that the words we use to express ourselves on Facebook and Twitter can predict the emergence of conditions like postpartum depression and psychosis. And the stat that I mentioned at the beginning of the show, a person's recent Google search history, it turns out, is a better predictor of suicide than their clinician's most recent notes. Each visit to a therapist creates a wealth of clinical data that is currently wasted because it's not recorded or analyzed. Speech and facial recognition technologies could be used to precisely measure a patient's expression, the words they use, and the intonation of their voice. There's a word of the day, Lance, for us.
An intonation.
An intonation. Such tools could be used to recognize the subtle changes that occur when a patient is about to become manic or analyze how they respond to treatment. A recent study published in the journal World Psychiatry showed that elements of speech such as coherence and frequency of possessive pronouns can predict with an accuracy of 83% whether someone at risk for psychosis will actually become psychotic. Such data is created at every clinical encounter, but it is far too subtle for a doctor to test.
Okay, people are going to say, and they're probably going to be surprised maybe when I say this, but people are going to say, well, I don't want to give all that information out. I mean, my gosh, they're going to know everything about me. Okay, but you're seeking treatment, right? Wouldn't you want people to have that? Well, they could use that for horrible things. Yes, they could, but you're seeking treatment, right? I mean, it's just like in the article, it says, I mean, to me, I have one word answer here. Duh. I mean, why wouldn't you use this? It's like when they say, we didn't know 100 years ago that hypertension would lead to heart attacks. And as someone who has hypertension, who doesn't want a heart attack, I've been being treated for that. Okay, can the insurance companies then deny me and do certain things to me because they have that information? Yes, they can. But is my doctor knowing that and being able to test that, able to treat me better so that I can live a longer, healthier life? Sure. So we're already there, folks. We just because we accept it in one area of health, why don't we accept it in the other one? And right? It's called mental health, just like physical health. So why is one okay and the other one's like, oh no, that's scary or that's not right? To me, they're the same thing. We're talking about the health and care of individuals. So it doesn't matter whether it's your physical health or your mental health. Your doctor should be allowed, able, and you should be willing to let them have any information they can that will help you.
Well, the difference is, right, because we've had a lot of these conversations about Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, yada, yada. They're already doing this, right? And we've already given them permission. Why are they doing that? Well, it's because you told them that they could.
Right, you use their search. You use their search engine. You use their product, and so you signed on to this. If you did so unknowingly or unwittingly, shame on you. But it's already there, so it's not like you said. There's no new information. They've been collecting it. use it. Why don't we use it for some good?
And if you're one of those people out there, I'm sure many of our listeners are, that, gets notifications from Facebook or from Instagram or Twitter, you might be eerily surprised sometimes at how the things that they notify you about, you want to check into, right? And then when you're on their app and you're scrolling through stuff, all of a sudden you realize the time, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for 20 minutes, an hour? Holy crap. How did that much time go by? The reason they're able to do that is not because they're getting lucky, right? It's because they've deployed technology that is learning what you like and who you are and what type of mood you're in. And it's gone beyond just showing you things you like. It's arrived at knowing, as they serve you some sample content to begin with, what you're liking, what you're spending time looking at. Because now we're getting away from, you don't even have to touch the like button, right? How long you're looking at something, how much time you spend on it is giving them information. And yeah, that's scary to think about because we think of all the ways that they're using it to tie us and rope us in. And, but at the same time, what if that information could be used to our benefit?
Exactly.
Right. And we have to have conversations. Lance and I have had them about, what are we going to do about, negotiating how our data gets used and doing a better job at making it clear to people how and when it's going to be used? Because most of the time, the way it's used right now is to our detriment, not to our benefit, right? It ropes us into services longer so that they can make more money off of us. Now, maybe you get enjoyment from it, right? So there might be that benefit. But at the end of the day, they're gaining more than you are from it. This is not what this proposal about using it in psychiatry is. The exact opposite. It's saying, you're carrying around this phone. We want to use it to help you, right?
Exactly.
And the good news is, one of the things that the article indicates is these people, the few studies that have been done, and we need to do more, is that if they had access to this data, you would get results sooner. And guess what that means? It's not going to cost you as much money to go get help. And what if more people got help, right? How would that change? Because this isn't just, somebody has psychosis or something, right? Which is its own thing. But what about people that are struggling with addiction, right? Of some kind, or, some other kind of mental health problem.
And how long do you wait to get an appointment? Because there are so many people that need services. If we can get services to people quicker and more efficiently, then we can help more people and in the same amount of time, which means society as a whole would be better off.
There's more to talk about, though, because it's not just about, right, if you need help, it's also, as Lance mentioned, what could this do for society on the whole? And we still have to talk about, of course, who's going to make sure that artificial intelligence isn't racist or biased? How are we going to make sure? Because it looks like
or sexist.
Right, or sexist. All can be categorized under our biased category, right? We don't want, if we're going to have artificial intelligence in our lives, which it looks like we are, how are we going to make sure that it's not making bad decisions because it has built-in bias? Lots more to talk about. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
We kind of got into the privacy conversation in the first segment. Do you want to release this kind of information? Well, the reality is you're already, right? There's a lot of companies that already have it. Now that, as we've talked about, should not be in an argument in and of itself to say, well, therefore you should give more of your data out, right? That's like that whole, well, I don't care about digital privacy because I have nothing to hide. It's okay. We don't want to use those arguments when we're talking about it. We want to talk about it in it's your information and you should feel comfortable with it. The author proposes that healthcare holistically, not just mental health, right, should have people in place that when you're coming in, because just to be clear, this isn't just psychiatry, right, that big data has an opportunity to help. There's things like cardiology and your dentist even, right? Or your chiropractor or your general practitioner or whoever you're seeing.
Well, isn't there stuff like for ophthalmology? Like when you go get your eyes checked, they can find physical problems from your health point by looking at your eyes. So, and the same thing with dentistry. So all of those things, they can find things out that you're not even there,
right,
to have them find out, which can lead to early intervention.
Because that saves us money, right? And leads to better care.
Well, keeps you alive. I mean, I was thinking about keeping you alive, but yeah, you always got to make it about money. So yeah, it would save money too, because it's cheaper to do preventive or early instead of reactionary healthcare.
And which is better from our well-being standpoint, right? Is it better to say, well, I feel healthy right now, and I can do these 2 or 3 things that aren't a big deal that keep me out of the hospital? Or do you want to wait and get ultra ill, and then you have to go into intensive care? And now it's, well, we can't fix it anymore, because if you had come to us 10 years ago, we could have fixed it. But now we can't fix it. So now all we can do is make you, quote unquote, comfortable. We can manage it.
Yeah, we can maintain it or manage it. Exactly.
And that, I think Lance and I spent a lot of time talking about as a healthcare entity, mental health, physical health, everything. We have to move away from that mindset. We have to be of a mindset that we want to get to things before they're problems, not after they've already become a problem, because that's part of why healthcare is becoming so expensive, is because we have to put people in facilities and we're treating problems instead of preventing problems, right? And that's, I think, a big part of what this is imagine if, for example, we say, well, I don't need this because I don't have any mental health issues right now. What if with the data that's already on your phone, right? And nobody uses it for anything malicious other than to provide you early warnings. What if your phone came built in with stuff that alerted you when it detected behavior that indicated that you're about to do something that you might regret, and gets you to just take a pause? I mean, we had a show, I don't know when that was, Lance, 12 months ago, that had to do with how effective it was if people took not days or hours, but waited 30 seconds before posting on social media. The study that indicated how different people behaved if there was a 30-second delay before they're allowed to post content. How much nicer they were, how many less posts they made when they were forced to think about things, right?
Well, I remember, I'm going back to the 70s now. I had something and wore it for a little while called a mood ring. And I don't know the particulars of, other than whatever color it was, let you know how you were feeling. And there were times when I would look down, I'm like, oh, I don't feel that way. And then I think, well, yeah, I really do. And I don't know how, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's the
principle of
the whole point of it, right? And if we were looking at that 50 years ago with a mood ring and it was kind of a funny thing, or I remember being given something from a mental health organization after a teacher in service where you could put your thumb on a credit card, like piece of plastic, and whatever color you rendered kind of read your mood. So this is something we've always been interested in. Now we have something that's even better to collect the data. Why not? I mean, like the article says, this isn't new, right? This isn't something it's new in how we're collecting it, but wanting to know it is not new.
No. And we know that it can improve the interconnectedness of our providers, because one of the biggest things, going through this with my father right now, right, is this crazy lack of connection between providers and the amount of time the patient has to spend trying to explain to a doctor what another doctor said.
Gee, that's why I don't go.
Because, and the point is, we can start to fix some of that by doing 2 things. One is we can have more ownership of our data, right, than we do right now, because it can be complicated to get, well, what do you know about me? Well, I don't really know what you know about me, and well, I'm entitled to know, but finding out, well, file these 10 forms and wait 10 weeks and then, maybe you'll get something that you can't read. And so the point is, I think here, the bigger point is, right, not just big data psychiatry, but if we are intentional in healthcare about deploying the data that already exists, I think that's the important note, right? On pretty much all of us, some of us more than others, but put it to our use instead of to the use of others, we can improve our own health, but also if we improve the health of others, like you highlighted in the last segment, Lance, that's good for all of society, right?
Exactly.
If healthcare costs go down and people are healthy more of the time and we stop mental health issues before they arise, we can lower addiction, on and on and on, right?
Violence. How many people get, turned to violence because they're frustrated or they're anxious or whatever. And it's like when we were talking about artificial intelligence and in the opening, and I said, why do you care? here's a case where we can solve problems with this that we're not even thinking of, that things can get better in all these areas just by doing this one thing. It's kind of like that ripple effect, when you throw the stone into the water and it just expands. That's what we're talking about here. I mean, the possibilities are endless to create a better society. So why wouldn't we want that?
I think we spend, and having a husband that's, works in healthcare, and Lance having, a daughter that does, I'm sure it's one of those things people in healthcare would tell you that it seems like there's a lot of things that exist and a lot of minutia that exist that's not good. And it's not very often you hear me talking about, I think we need more positions in healthcare, but a position I think is absolutely essential is a human being that helps patients navigate a new way to their data, right? And say, look, if you let us do this, this is exactly how we're allowed to use it, right? Are you comfortable with that? Here's how it can help you, right? And then you can make a real decision about it. Because the way it works right now, right, with all these other companies is you get this super long text that nobody wants to read, that's all written in legalese, that's really complicated, and nobody can make any sense of it. So we all say accept because it's the only way to get to the other side, right? And so
get to the next screen.
Exactly. And we don't want it to be that way in healthcare, right? You should know, because it's your information. Somebody should be there to explain to you, here's the potential benefits of letting us have access to this and understanding what we're not allowed to do with it, right? And you can tell us and set where you're comfortable with. Because I think that's a key, it's that whole thing. We can talk about doing it all we want, but if nobody will do it because it makes them nervous, that's no good. And this is a way I think that you get your friendly redneck liberals of the world to be able to actually make informed decisions about it, rather than, do you just want to let us track everything you do and do whatever we want with it? Because I think most of us would say, that, I'm not super comfortable with that. That sounds kind of scary. That's why I think it's important that there be some kind of process for that, and that we do what we can to unify it, because again, all this data clearly is powerful and we're not deploying it to its fullest extent. But as we talk about artificial intelligence, Lance, right? This idea of what we've talked about is just data collection, but now we have to do something with the data.
Exactly.
And that's where our artificial intelligence piece comes in. Because you're right, we're going to collect this mass amounts of data with this new, ability in psychiatry to collect it all, but somebody has to do something with it. And unless we want to just employ endless people to mine the data and try to make decisions, it's almost inevitable that computers are going to be part of this process.
But in a sense, they already are. And some of these big companies like Google and all these other ones are trying to sell programs to different people, right? To
exactly
law enforcement agencies, to cities, to states. And they're saying, look, you can use this and it will streamline X. It will streamline whatever, this part or this part or this part. And the author of this article from the New York Times talks about, whoa. There are some issues here with this. So we're trying, and that's what I said in the beginning, some of these companies are trying to take it mainstream. And it's like, we haven't worked out all the kinks yet. Do we really want to unleash something without working out some of the major kinks that we're catching already? I mean, obviously some things have kinks in them anyway, no matter what you do, but do we really want this released out there and having people start to, but we know that it doesn't do this well, but it does this, it does 80% of it really well. So we just don't care about the 20% that it's not doing well. I'm a little nervous about that.
Well, because then you think about things like healthcare, right? And it's like, well, I'm not okay with that margin. If I'm in that margin, that's real bad news for me. If all of a sudden I'm doing all this stuff because it's supposed to help me, but then it actually hurts me more because we didn't fine tune this stuff and make sure that it works properly, that can be real bad. This other article is from the New York Times, and it's also linked at thestateofus.org, but we'd like your thoughts. Send us an email on what you've heard so far, podcast@thestateofus.org. So send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. We'd like to hear what you think about the idea of big data psychiatry. And what we're kind of shifting to talking about is this next article, how we make sure that AI machines aren't racist, or more holistically biased, right? We don't want AI machines to unfairly categorize people by race, sex, right? Whatever. We need them to be very, very accurate, especially if we're going to deploy them in settings like healthcare or police work. It's very important that they be very accurate. And the author writes, and we'll get into the next segment here, but think about this over the break. In the nearly 10 years I've written about artificial intelligence, two things have remained constant. The technology relentlessly improves in fits and sudden great leaps forward. And bias is a thread that subtly weaves through the work in a way that tech companies are reluctant to acknowledge. What does that mean for you? What does that mean for the future of AI? Questions that we're going to endeavor to answer. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
From the New York Times article, quote, "I'm not worried about machines taking over the world. I'm worried about groupthink, insularity, and arrogance in the AI community, especially with the current hype and demand for people in the field. The people creating the technology are a big part of the system. If many are actively excluded from its creation, this technology will benefit a few while harming a great many." And that is, I think, a nice way of summing up what we have to discuss. AI is scary to a lot of us because I think a lot of us don't really understand how it works, and nor do we necessarily have to understand the particulars of how it works. But I think understanding it's part of being a little less scared of it, because the reality is companies are going to deploy it, right? Because it saves them time, money, it makes them more efficient. That's the route they're going. So the question is, how do we navigate it in a way that protects us and make sure that it's not unfairly excluding or targeting people in different communities and of different backgrounds? So basically the way that most artificial intelligence systems work, Lance, it's called a neural network. It's a mathematical system that could learn tasks that engineers could never code into a machine on their own. So most of us are familiar with the idea, right, of the old style computer where we can type in a command and then the computer does the thing based on the command, right? I mean, at the simplest level. Or even today, I point the mouse here and I click on this thing and this other thing happens, right? That's traditional computer programming. That is not what artificial intelligence is, right? You do not program all the information into it. Rather, you teach it how to learn. And by analyzing thousands of photos of something, it can learn to recognize whatever that thing is.
But again, and I'm going to interrupt you here because I understand the difference, but then the artificial intelligence is only as good as what you give it to learn from, correct? That's my point, is I understand from a long time ago having this argument when computers first came out to the public, because I'm that old. I remember a time when we didn't have them, that the computer's only as good as the programmer. Now you're saying the programming is different, but it's still, if I understand it correctly, it's only as good as the pictures or whatever information you're feeding it is. That's only what they can learn. They can't learn on their own. They have to learn by the information. The computer has to learn from the information you give it. So if the information you give it is not total, it's going to learn, air quotes, incorrectly.
We'll put it this way, right? The Where's Waldo game, okay, that many people are familiar with. And for those of you that aren't, right, it's a hodgepodge picture with all this stuff going on, and you're supposed to pick out Waldo, who's a character. And
in his red and white stocking cap.
There you go. And so it is a challenging game for a lot of people to play. And even the very best human in the world, right, could never just directly program a machine to be as good, maybe as good as them, but a machine working on artificial intelligence where you let it analyze every Where's Waldo that's ever been made, right, would beat a person every single time at identifying it not only faster, but more accurately. right? Because sometimes if you've played the game, nope, that's not him, and then you find him, right? Yeah, that happens sometimes. You could teach a machine to do it better if you gave it access to all of that, right? Because it would be faster. It is faster and more accurate than people. On the other hand, if you only gave it 2 examples and then you had rehearsed off of an example that it had never seen before, you might be able to beat it, right? And it's also the same thing to use a different example, if we wanted to create an AI that was an expert on history, and we gave it all this American history and all this French history, right? And you could ask it anything, and it'll beat our friendly redneck liberal every time on American and French history. It'll answer it faster and more accurately every time. We didn't give it anything on Rome, though. And now we ask it about Rome. And it's, and the friendly redneck liberal can beat it. Well, is it fair? I mean, we never gave it anything on Rome, right? So the point is, to Lance's point, it is very relevant what it has access to learn from. It's the same thing of if we locked a child in a room, right? And we asked them, here's English, and now we want you to speak Spanish, but you've never seen Spanish before. I mean, that seems crazy because it's like, well, duh, but it's the same thing. Why can an AI machine be racist? Well, it's not because the machine is racist. It's because what happened is you only gave it photos of white people, or you gave it, well, like one of the examples in the article that's kind of terrifying is the pornography example, right? Which is where basically they wanted to develop, and this sounds like a good AI thing to have, right? They wanted to develop an AI machine that can help filter and keep pornography away from, for example, educational institutions. Okay, right? I mean, that makes sense. Of course, that would be something that we would, I think, generally agree makes sense. And so they have to train the AI to be able to recognize what is pornography, right? And how to filter it away. So we get a whole bunch of G-rated photos from a stock photo system. Well, it just so happens that most of those G-rated photos are of white people, like 95% of white people. And so again, we've given these to the machine. And now we say, analyze all these websites, right? All these porn websites, and you just pull the random images from them and you analyze it all. Well, guess what? Those porn websites, right, have people of all different colors and races and genders. But the stock photos we gave them were mostly men and they were mostly white. So what did the computer learn? Well, what it learned, given what it was given, is that, well, if I see a black female, that's probably porn, because the information we gave it indicated to it that, statistically speaking, what I have learned is that good photos don't have black females in them and bad photos do, and so is the machine racist? No, but the information we gave it created a racial bias because we didn't give it fair information to work on.
And the problem is the companies that are creating the AI are then taking these programs and giving them, trying to sell them out there, saying, without people knowing that that's the problem. And therein lies the problem. So we have to do a better job of teaching it before we release it on the public. These tech guys will talk around the issue, and then they're being allowed to release these ideas without having worked out all the kinks, because the bottom line to them is, yeah, well, it works 80% of the time. It works 90% of the time. So it hurts 10% of the people. I don't care because I got a paycheck. My stock went up and my investors are now making money.
The other part of AI that I think, not to scare people even more, Lance, I think it's important to understand is you may have just listened to my explanation about, right, we're going to teach AI to tell us about history, right? Or we're going to teach it to identify pornographic imagery. Both of those things in and of themselves seem pretty,
seem pretty innocuous. That's not a big deal.
Should I really be scared of an AI machine that can recite history or can filter pornography? Those don't sound particularly scary, right? I mean, that doesn't sound like Terminator's coming to get us kind of thing, right? But now imagine, what if we create then a parent AI that has access to all of these other AIs that we've built? Now we're not building, right, a simple machine designed to tell us about history. Now we're building a machine that can understand history and pornography and can identify people faster in photos than anything else, and just add it on. What topic do you want to add in there? Because we can build a neural,
fill in the blank, right?
A neural network for each item.
Right. Fill in
and
the
then
blank.
once you've built those and you tie them together, now you've created something, right, that isn't just, well, I just know things about history, right? It's now I'm making decisions about what type of healthcare you're going to get. And when I say I'm making decisions, the AI, because we've linked multiple sets of data together, and then we've allowed it to learn from those sets of data statistically what to do with those things, right? Which again, on surface sounds fine, but you can imagine how one little tiny problem down here where we taught it the wrong thing about pornography, all of a sudden, ruins the whole system because we linked a serious infectious disease into a greater system that now, somehow has affected history. And has affected your healthcare. And I mean, on and on it goes. And I think that's Lance's point about we cannot overstate the serious nature of pushing this technology out without making sure that it is incredibly accurate. Because doing that isn't just, an offensive, well, I took pictures of my black friend and Google decided that it should put those in a folder called gorillas. Is that bad? Yes. Should we fix it? Absolutely. Is that going to end the world? Probably not. But if we don't fix that, and then we use that same technology, for example, in healthcare or in law enforcement, now you're screwing with people's lives, right? Literally. I mean, the AI,
the machine takes out the human error. My eyes, my informant, my eyewitnesses, well, they saw something that's really not there. And now, see, we're going to use the machine because we can trust it because it doesn't have any emotions. And my point is, well, maybe you can't trust the machine because you haven't fed the right information into it to make those decisions. Yes, that is my point. And that's where I stand.
And that's why we're having these conversations, right? We don't want to scare people. We want people to be aware, because if we're aware and we talk about it, then we can do something about it.
Well, and you can't, and we have these conversations because that's what we do here at True Chat, these honest, open conversations about different topics. But you can't be like the friendly redneck liberal used to be, and that is bury your head in the sand and it's going to go away. This is going to happen, folks. So we need to become actively involved, and you've done so by listening. And hopefully, like we've said, send us an email, at podcast@thestateofus.org, what you think about this. But we have these conversations, and we make you aware of these things so we can have the conversations, so we can fix them before we unleash or these problems get any worse. So talk to your family, your friends, and when they say, hey, where are you hearing all this stuff? This is kind of interesting. This is good ideas. Tell them, it's the State of Us, and they can find us, with Apple Podcast, Overcast, Stitcher, and anywhere fine podcasts are heard.
The State of Us is released as a podcast Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. Eastern Time. We're also heard in select talk radio markets around the country, so check your local AM or FM station and see if they carry our program. For the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.